The auto rotate was on the previous video, so don't mind that. It looks like we're okay now, and I hope you're all good. I'm waiting for a few to come in. Yep, there's one alive then. Okay. So the weather's got lovely again. Bit of sunshine, bit of fresh air. We're all feeling a bit positive, and of course, I'm going to talk about the prevailing matter of the moment without trying to set off too many of the robo spies on the YouTube AI. But this is going to be a big video, so you might want a pen and paper for this one. If I name any topics or books or anything like that, just tell me what you didn't get them. Let me know in the comments, and either me or someone else will help you with this. But this is going to be a biggie, okay? Now, this will be, although this is not, my other channel is currently on a long-term ban for being cynical of the ping pong. I'm renamed this channel, which used to be Open Source Occult TV, as Thomas Sheridan 2, and we're continuing the epic voyage here, okay? So, but we have to be more cryptic and allegorical and palava-ish, using the tribe's hobo language, which we've developed in order to get around this. Now, this is the parallel society in action. It's not just literally switching off the RT, BBC, CNN, Sky News. It's not just, not being subject to the man. It's not just, developing a cynicism towards the psychopathic control grid. It's about literally rewiring our brains. And why we're rewiring our brains is we're creating a new reality that will actually come into manifestation. I know you think this is bonkers, but it's not. Please hear me out. If we stick with it. Now, there's a great spiritual force, as I said, moving across this planet. And this is what's causing all the profane to take needlecraft, okay? They're indulging needlecraft because of this great spiritual force wants to remove them from the world. And doesn't necessarily exterminate or kill them. It move them out of the way so those of us who are not among the profane and who can see through this miasma of lies can transform ourselves into a new reality. Now, at first I used to think it was well, on some levels it is a dark, because our pagan gods are neutral. They're both dark. They're not loving gods and they're not hateful gods or vengeful gods. They've got very similar attitudes as human beings. They get business done. Just think of like Samuel L. Jackson when he was talking about talking about, say, Votan. Motherfucker gets business done, man. Motherfucker gets the business done. And as he's getting the business done, this is Votan. This is the photonic energy I spoke about in the last video. And his eight-legged steed is riding across the world, particularly the northern hemisphere right now, removing the profane. Not necessarily for us, but because they're no longer helping his two ravens, Hugin and Mugen. Thought and memory have flown from Asgard to Earth and told them what's going on with the Rona and the ping pong and the needlecraft. And he's on his steed Slipnir, and he's coming to Earth with his spear, and he's doing his own needlecraft. Okay, so do not stand in the way of this force, or you will be trampled under the 8 legs of Slipnir. Whatever archetype your culture uses, it's time. And because he's not doing it for our benefit, but the gods also understand that the ones who will serve the planet the best then have an opportunity to escape and flee. To escape and flee, and to move and create their own reality. And that's what's happening here. So, and as negative as it is on the surface, remember, a mother cries out in torment when her baby is coming out of her. And the mothers, any mother who's told you they had lots of children will say the more painful it was, the more special the child was. And can you only imagine the forces that a caterpillar has to endure as it crystallizes into a crystal inside the pupa before it emerges as a beautiful butterfly? This is what's happening to us. This is so hold fast to that which is true. In the meantime, and so does I'm a big believer in the mythologies and the sagas and stuff as a way of telling us how to deal with this, and we're dealing with this right now. So it's been a great. And people say to me like, "Oh, Thomas, you've been a great help during all this." Well, that's because in my life, the mythologies, the epics, the sagas, the cycles have been of great help to me. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, I'm showing what helped me in my life and how it's helping yours. You're all enduring your own monomyth in this macro myth. Okay. So, rebuilding this new reality. Okay, well, in London yesterday, 750,000 people, and the BBC probably reported it as 25 people, 25 white nationalists or something, I call them, marched for freedom. Good luck to them, total respect, no problem, don't change nothing. A march is not the same thing as being free. What you're doing is still operating within the prevailing psychopathic paradigm and trying to change it. You won't change it. You cannot feed tofu to a piranha and expect it to become a vegetarian. It doesn't work like that, okay? And that's what these marches and protests are, and petitions and all. It's feeding tofu to a piranha, expecting it to become a vegetarian. And also, London being the most surveyed city in the world, all the cameras, all the biometrics, all the AI and everything software, and in that city, they'll have got a photograph of everyone there and don't know everyone's name unless they were clever and did something like wearing a complete face mask. But so I totally respect you guys, and may the gods bless you and protect you. But it won't change nothing. You changed nothing yesterday, nothing at all. And this is where my version of things and our as the tribe version of things come into their own. Is that rather than feeding tofu to piranhas and hoping they become vegetarians, we walk away from the fucking river and we go into the jungle, okay? And we go into the jungle, and instead of feeding tofu to the piranhas in the hope that we can swim across the river to the other side, we're going to cut down the fucking bamboo and we're going to build a raft, and we're going to paddle or punt our way above the piranhas over to the other bank into the new reality. That's what we're going to do. Now, the forest is the great unknown, right? That's what we're facing. But when you're in the great unknown, you have the same advantages as the psychopathic control grid. You're also out of the way, the piranha under the water, like, where the fuckers go? Where'd they go? Where'd they go? Where's our dinner gone? Right? The piranhas are under the water. They can't see you because you've disappeared into the jungle. And all I can hear is hacking noises like, what are those bastards doing, the piranhas? Where's our dinner? We're going to go and eat them, right? And the next thing you know, the piranhas see a rectangular square that on the bottom, on the surface of the lake. What the hell is that? Of the river, and it's moving across. What the? On the other side, and then they don't see the people anymore, and then they go, oh, where did the people all go? And they go, oh, they just vanished, they're gone. But that's us. We're going to build that raft and get to the other side of the river, okay? Now, the forest is the great unknown, and we have more advantage in the great unknown than they do, because they can't get in there. Okay, the piranha cannot leave the water and follow us into the forest, right? So, being in the tribe, we're in the jungle, right? We're in the jungle. We're in there now. That's why we don't have an organizational structure. There's no leadership. There's no minutes. There's no canon. There's no set of rules. It's pure chaos. But we all have a general idea that my white ass needs her black ass, and her black ass needs his brown ass, and his yellow ass needs his pink ass, and in my case, pinkish, bluish, white ass. Okay? We all need each other. But at the same time, too, we're not abiding by some rules that have been given to us. We're all kind of like wired into this kind of, hey, this kind of thing. We understand the osmosis of the whole process. She's like me, he's like me, they're like me. Okay, we're kind of vibing here. But as soon as someone came along and says, you better do this according to rulebook number 9, we walk away. This is what's beautiful about it. There's an osmosis here. And so we're in the jungle, and we're cutting down bamboo, and we're getting vines in order to strap them together so we can build our raft across the river. What is the bamboo and the vines? Well, this is where we bring concentration, consciousness, and things like what I'm talking about, using our own words, language, and different reality to move beyond it. So, for instance, changing the vernacular, needlecraft, ping pong, PPP, this Windows Zero, all these kinds of technical things we're using. This is getting us out of it already. This is the tools that's allowing us to cut down the bamboo and to build our raft across the piranhas. So, this is where this video really begins now, okay? Mythology. Now, I'm going to go through an awful lot here, so get yourself a cup of tea. If you're watching this not live, pause the video now. Make yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, because we're going to go onto a ride here, okay? And if you're bored and sick of me, well, you're going to be super bored and sick of me by now, by the end of this. Now, as I said, mythology is more real than history. And the reason why it's more real than history is because history is the past. It's something you've been told has happened, okay? And it's been written by people who have essentially won that version of reality, okay? And they've won that version of reality, and then they rewrite history to make it look like that their benevolence was what triumphed in the end. You see this all through all history. This is why all history is ultimately a lie. Although, when I say it's a lie, it did happen, and it often did happen in the method it happened, but the editorialization of it is always a lie, this kind of thing. Or it's completely hidden, like the Cathars, Like, we never taught about the Cathars in school because, or the Swedish Crusades, because the sheer evilness of Christianity would be exposed to even the biggest moron. So it's hidden. Now, let's say with the witchcrafts and all this stuff. Now, like, for instance, in Ireland, we're told that, we've had 500 years of Catholics and Protestants killing each other. But they don't tell you that the reason why they're killing each other is because St. Patrick brought Christianity here. They don't want you making that deduction. And if they didn't have Christianity, we wouldn't be fighting over two versions of a Jewish God. That's not even our God. But it's those simple deductions that the scribes of history do not want us to know. Now, mythology is more important than history because mythology is the scribe of reality. And it's not owned by any structure. Now, they tried to take control of it. They're always trying, the psychopathic control grid is always trying to steal mythology. And again, if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, I'm not putting a religion down, okay? You can still come on the raft with us. We want you on the raft with us, Just don't be telling us, that your way is the only way. Learn how to be tolerant, and everything will be wonderful. Pagans aren't judging you. Don't judge us. Simple as that. Everyone's cool, okay? You're welcome also. And atheists and agnostics and flying spaghetti monster types, you're welcome too. So, mythology, okay? Now, let's talk about the Viking raids in the early part. We're told that the Vikings left Scandinavia because they were just bastards who wanted to steal other people's stuff. This is a lie of history, okay? The Vikings were at war with the Carolingian Empire. The Carolingian Christian Empire, led by Charlemagne, had been committed unbelievable acts of atrocity upon the Saxons and other pagan tribes that they came into contact with in Europe. We all know about the bloody verdict of Verdun, and what happened there. And when the pagans refused to convert, we all know, So the Norse and the Vikings knew this, okay? So they were when they attacked Lindisfarne, that was a strategic military attack, because these monasteries that existed all around Britain and Ireland and France were supply lines for knights in the Carolingian Empire. They could get fed, get their swords polished, get a woman brought from the village to them, and that's what they were. They were like combat stations for Carolingian knights. Okay, in the service of Charlemagne. So they were strategic military attack places. And that's why they hit Lindisfarne first, on the coast, a strategic one between the north of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Europe. And take everything in them, kill all the monks, and get out, or take them as slaves, okay? Now, to prove it was a war against Christians, as I pointed out in my book, The Druid Code, when the Vikings attacked the monastery at Tala, which is also mentioned in Lovecraft. Remember that name, Tala, okay? And which is now a large urban area in southwest Dublin. They killed all the Christian monks, but left the Culdees alive. Now, if you don't know who the Culdees are, the Culdees were a very interesting sect based out of the island of Iona between Scotland and Ireland, who were almost like mediators between the changeover between Christianity, between paganism and Christianity. And they were responsible for writing down and retaining and holding a lot of the pagan mythology and keeping it safe, because they knew that they couldn't have any power against the Roman Empire, or the Carolingian Empire as it had been called by that, before it became the Holy Roman Empire at that period. So they kept the stories alive. We are like the Culdees, my friends. Some of us are druids, well, or from a druidic point of view, pagans. Some of us are satyrs from the Nordics. Some of us are classical and Hellenic pagan priests and priestesses. And some of us are even Christians and Muslims and Jews and atheists. But we all have a collective understanding that what's happening with the world at the moment, and the Rona, and what the world are trying to use needlecraft to get, is fundamentally an immoral and an indecent instruction of what came before it. So we know that. And we're not going to get needlecraft and be ping-ponged, okay, and into this new paradigm that's coming. So we bond together, okay? So we're like the Culdees in that way. Some of us will be more pagan inclined. Some of us might be slightly more, well, if we can work within their system, we can break it from within. But then there's moderate ones in the middle. But ultimately, so what happened was, when the Vikings raided the monastery at Tala, remember that, it's going to come back in. You're going to get a swirling world of chaos here in this video. They killed the Christian monks, but they didn't kill the Culdees. Why? Because the Culdees were not an enemy's army. And that proves that the Viking war against the so-called raids by the Norsemen were strategic military assaults. And this is why they captured York in England and Dublin in Ireland. And this is why Dublin for 300 years, don't think of it as the Norsemen occupying Dublin. Think of it as 300 years of the Norsemen and the Norse bringing back the pagan gods. Because Christianity, although it existed in that region of the Viking Dublin, it was not the dominant force. The old gods came back. They have found relics in Viking Dublin where you have the Morrigan next to the god Tyr, the Norse god Tyr, and so they all swirl together. And Brian Boru, who's no friend of mine, went on a war of genocide after he illegally made himself Ardwi, and moved to the north and attacked the Vikings and killed many Irish or Christian along the way. And that's why there were so many Irish on the side of the Vikings. And because they didn't like Brian Boru. Half of Brian Boru's army was Irish. They did not want to fall under the control of Rome again. And because they remembered what happened. So that's what that was about, okay? Now, Tala, remember Tala, okay? Now, As you know, I'm a great fan of the H.P. Lovecraft mythos. I'm a great fan of that man and his writing. And I believe that he had magical power, whether it was deliberate from reading about his grandfather Whipple's books in Freemasonry, or whether it was instinctual. I think it could be both. He did unleash magical potentials. And he, through his science fiction cosmic horror stories. And one of his most famous stories, The Shadow over Innsmouth, is about what's happening in the world right now. A town called Innsmouth, a fictional town in southern Massachusetts, in northern Massachusetts, sorry, in the 1920s, a young man who's on his sort of like gap year from university is interested in old seaport architecture of New England. And he wants to go to Innsmouth, and he's in Newburyport, and they're all saying, you don't want to go there. The people they're not right, something not right with them. And the train line was pulled up years ago, so he has to get a bus, an old rattleback. If you watch my video, Liber Providence, I will put the link down below so you can watch that. And all about it. So when he gets to Innsmouth, he finds one guy who's he finds the people all have to call the Innsmouth look. When they start looking fish-like. They start looking fish-like as they age. And this is because their DNA has been altered through interbreeding with these South Sea Islanders. The town was controlled by a family called the Marsh family, who ran a gold refinery in Innsmouth. And they became incredibly wealthy, and Innsmouth was one of the most popular ports in the east coast of America until the World War One. That's a fictional city now, town. And it all went to shit after that. But because what had happened was this hybridization. Now, this is the ping pong needlecraft. We all know that's not a VACINE. We know it's a RNA alteration. Okay, so there are all these people who are taking the needlecraft are becoming the new Marsh Innsmouth. They're getting the Innsmouth look because their hybridization is happening through the needlecraft. Okay. So this one guy goes into the town and realizes, so it's just amazing, really. So he meets an old drunk who's not, or a kid who works in the shop who's not from Innsmouth, and the place is dilapidated and falling apart. And that's the old world that the genetic hybridization has destroyed, and the new world is the locals as half fish creatures living off, and we're back to the sea again, living on a reef called Devil's Rock, a Devil's Reef just off the coast. And you can see them now and again during the full moon. They've chosen to live under the sea. Now, this young guy decides to spend the night in this mount because he misses the last bus home, even though a drunk tells him to get the hell out of this place. A drunk tells him the whole story and tells, get out of this place. And during the night, something enters his room, and then later on in life he finds out that he has the Innsmouth look. And he's also been genetically hybridated. So he's went into Innsmouth, and if you were to put that in needlecraft, he was VACINED, enated. Forget the D, enated. And he ends up transforming into his DNA change and going to the bottom of this ocean to live among the subaquatic denizens. Now, that was all started with an ancient race of cosmic sea monsters called the Old Ones, the Great Old Ones, who lived at the bottom of the ocean, most famous of them all being Cthulhu. Okay, if you're not reading Lovecraft, you should be reading or just watching. It's like Lord of the Rings. It's one of those things Tolkien you have to take part in. Now, so this leads us to a thing. Now, why so? See, this teaches us a power of mythology. We're able to apply what happened to Innsmouth to what's going on today with needlecraft, okay? In the same way, we can apply what's happened with the Viking sagas or the mythological cycles or the Hellenic cycles with what's going on today, okay? So what you're happening here, you listen to me saying, what's this Irish gobshite on about? I'm rewiring your brain away from the BBC, RT, CNN, and into a way of thinking and seeing the world as not as they portray it, but as how the mythological operating systems will allow you to see it as you want it. Okay. Now this brings us all to something called. See, it's going to be a long ass video. This brings us all to something called chaos, discordia. Okay. Now chaos. What happened was you had people have always known that ritual magic, our magic, was a way of changing reality. Right back to the parade of idols at the Ishtar Gate, through the torchlight parade of idols through the Ishtar Gate in ancient Babylonia. The priests of Babylonian Sumeria were always amazed. They soon found out that people would be spellbound. They'd be sitting there like, they were spellbound, and then they could get them. And if they could spellbind them with these spiritual and religious events, rituals, particularly if they were done at night, like the Greek mystery plays, it's like those Greek. Have you ever seen those performances of those like Euripides plays and stuff? They're really intense and spooky. You'll have people that have their face covered. They go, "We've lost him to shadow side." The voice of shadow side, shadow side. So, you have different voices in the background, and are very powerful. And you can imagine sitting in the amphitheaters in Greece 3,000 years ago, and this being performed under the firelights. The flickering torches, in total silence under the stars of the cosmos, and the power that would have on human consciousness. Just like in the cinema, we've all had that experience. We've all seen a film that's changed us, or a rock concert. That's what always held at night. And so mythology keeps us in a sort of a permanent state of that, in order for us to be deprogrammed by the prevailing thing, rather than them doing it for us. So, but they've always known this. So this is the basis of ritual magic, and even things like the Catholic Latin Mass work the same way. I'd probably still go to Mass if it was the Latin Mass, and even if I didn't necessarily believe, I would probably find that experience quite magical, because you'd be watching something that went right back to the temple of Apollo and Jupiter in ancient Rome and Greece, and anyway. You see, I see the Catholics saying all the priests since the scandemic came along, all the priests have let us down, and all the bishops and all. No, they've let us down ever since. They've let you down ever since Vatican II, when they took away the Latin Mass, because that's when they took magic out of it. You hear John Waters talk about his the sort of almost like supernatural mystical qualities of his father and people of that generation in rural Ireland. Why? They were raised on the Latin Mass. They were part of a mystical culture that went right back to the ancient pagan temples of the old world. That was all cut off in the late 1960s by Vatican II. Anyway, I digress again. And so, where was I? Yeah, spellbounding and mystery plays and magic, and they've got the elites. I hate calling them that. The establishment, the motherfucker man. They have always known this, that they create a different reality for us to exist in, using these magical things. Now, so what happened was it was always very ritualized, and the way in the 1970s, mid 1970s, a bit earlier, early mid 1970s. People in the rock music scene got sick of being told that you had to have the musical proficiency and the bullshit pomposity of the likes of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, yes, and Genesis. You had to study at some Royal Imperial College. If you look at all the rock bands that came out of Britain, with the exception of say Black Sabbath, nearly all of them came, and say the Small Faces. Almost none of them were working class. They were all from like Imperial College, Christ College, Cambridge, Pink Floyd, all, and even I'm not like a lot of these bands too, Christ College, and they were all like academic musicians, and that's what dominated rock, and even Frank Zappa came from money in America. All the American ones all came from money as well too. And then you had on both sides of the Atlantic working class people who never had access to Christ College, Cambridge, or, didn't go to Berkeley or Stanford. And they still wanted to play rock and roll music, but didn't want to do 14-hour Emerson, Lake and Palmer keyboard solos. So we saw the gestation through things like punk rock. First of that would be bands like the Dictators and the MC5, leading to the Ramones and stuff in America. And on this side of the world, we eventually got the Sex Pistols, who were ironically, uh, you know, influenced by like Roxy Music. Now, even though most of the Roxy music came from posh clubs, Brian Ferry came from a very poor working class background in County Durham in the north of England. And I think that's what he was the one who gave, and it certainly wasn't Brian Eno, he was the one who gave them the edge and made them appealable to working class people. There was something supernatural. You watch the early Roxy music videos, and you know there's something supernatural about their sound. Even their posh, polished sound that came along later. Songs like Over You and Avalon. There's a mystical quality to that. And that's because of Brian Ferry's, even though he looked like Cary Grant and everything, and looked and acted like him and got the women like him. He never lost his thick County Durham accent when you hear him being interviewed. And so the Sex Pistols. So we had punk rock, and punk rock was like, all you need to do is learn a few chords, get some guitars and stuff like that, and write some songs about the world you live in now, and what you'd want it to be. A classic example of that was the Undertones. The Undertones, well, British middle class punk rock groups like the Clash, who were all posh boys like the Clash, and Joe Strummer with his like private school education. We're writing about the People's Revolution. You had the Undertones who grew up in Derry in Northern Ireland during a real fucking revolution, where they were having to dodge bullets to go to school or even go to band practice. And they didn't. What did they write songs about? What did the Undertones in the middle of the revolution, a real revolution, write songs about? Meeting girls, playing football, and going dancing. You know why? Because those things were denied to them by the world they lived in. What Joe Strummer was romantic about, the Undertones were living through. And they weren't going to write about Sandinistas. They were going to write about going to get dances and meeting girls and playing football. My perfect cousin. Things like that. Teenage kicks, just wanting to have a normal life. And that was their chaos magic workings. And that's what happened at the same time with punk rock. Chaos magic came along. Now, chaos magic was to the occult what punk rock was to music. And the people behind, like Phil Hine and the others, they had come to understand that you didn't have to do Golden Dawn or Thelemic rituals anymore. There was so much energy abundant and available in true popular culture, unleashed by Crowley, of course, that you could actually take that and have a punk rock version of it. And instead of having, candlelit rituals with lavish costumes inside English stately homes when you're doing magic occult rituals, you could use things like electronic music, synthesizers, movies, science fiction, comic books, cartoons, even in my case, fairgrounds, things like that, to build and release charges, pornography, to build and release charges, and then that became the chaos magic thing, the whole thing that took off there. And Lovecraft was very central to that. Although Lovecraft was part of like proto chaos in the same way, the Stooges were kind of proto punk. Even Little Richard, I would say, was probably even the first punk. There was sort of like, there was hints of punk rock years before there was punk rock in bands, the Dictators and stuff like that. And the New York Dolls, the same thing. You'd had like gone back to Austin Osman Spare through him, through the Cut Ups movement, through Lovecraft, through those loads, there was all hints of it there, through the Beat Poet movement, Allen Ginsberg. There was lots of little bits of hints of it there and before that. But it really was all kind of formulated with Lieber Null in the chaos movement at the same time in the punk rock movement. That you could hack reality yourself using literally the kitchen sink. You could literally do it that way. And that's where I at that age, when I was very young, into magic. So I was very lucky to be born at the right time. Or was it kismet? Was it fate? Was it serendipity? See? Anyway, So this showed from an early this showed that ordinary people could hack reality. And suddenly working class people all over the world who had no hope in life were suddenly becoming Hollywood stars, top rock stars, uh, top people in entertainment, and authors, and becoming very famous because the chaos magic thing had showed them, and even things like fanzines. And the music press today, it was horrible after from the 90s on, but fanzines and sort of like music magazines at the period of the late 70s, hot press, sounds, there was a very kind of like chaos magic vibe about them, and they changed the world. They changed the world. And in America, you had, I mean, I had a fanzine that changed my life. A friend of mine in New York, Greg Fasolino, had a fanzine called Heaven Down Here, which is named after the pun on the Echo and the Bunnymen song. And I that changed my life and put me into contact with people that changed my life through a small ad in that. And I was making fanzines myself, and so it was like fanzines allowed ordinary people to hack reality, and that was they changed. And people say, well, how does this hack reality? Look at the world. Look at the world prior to 1976. It'd be unimaginable that the number one song with "God Save the Queen" by the Sex Pistols, by four dirtbags from London, would actually be the number one single, to the point where the BBC couldn't deny it. This is the power of magic. This is hacking reality. They may not call it magic. They may have called it punk, but it came out of nowhere. That's because Johnny Rotten, John Lydon, and Steve Cook, and Steve Jones, and Glenn Matlock had built their own raft and went above the piranhas. Before they knew it, they were on the other side and were number one in the charts with "God Save the Queen." This was chaos. That's the way the chaos magic works, and that's what we're doing with the tribe. We're building a raft again. So they want us protesting in the streets. They want us. They want us, terrified. They want us protesting and angry so they can find us and name us. What they hate most of all is not knowing what we're up to. Or not. So they would look. They're watching me, obviously, right? 'Cause they're watching me, obviously, right? And so that's why they shut down the odd video now and again, and that kind of thing. They would love nothing more than if I said, what we're going to do now is create the Church of the Tribe. We're going to have a book that's going to tell you everything to do, and we're going to have a list of 10 commandments that have been written by me for you to do. And you are to follow them all, and then go through these degrees, and you will one day be a priest of the tribe. They would love that, because what they can do then is, now we have their rule book. Now we can rewrite it and change them. That's why we don't have a rule book. We're chaos, discordia, and we're using the vibe of osmosis to connect with each other. We're actually using a kind of a telepathy, believe it or not. I feel very strong. I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel very strongly connected to all you guys, like family, literally like family. And I bet you all feel the same to one another in the tribe. That even when you argue and even when you're not getting each other's tits, you're still like, yeah, but this tribe. That's how I feel about all of us right now. Even though I'll never meet 99% of you, that's how I feel. Because we're all lifeboats, and like I spoke about this many years ago, I was going to build my long ship and sail into a different reality. And 6, 7 years ago, I was talking about that on stage in AV, whatever it was, AV5 or whatever. And here we are. We're building our long ship and sailing to a new reality. Now, I spoke about, and all you have to, in order to get there, to build this raft with me and with us, is, I said, to think outside their way of thinking. And the beauty of this is mythology. Now, how you do this is you suddenly see the world around you as not being a fixed structure. This is very important. When you go on demonstrations and marches, you're seeing the world as a fixed structure. It's better to stay at home and do something creative instead. A great way of doing this is is to note synchronicities and but not become. But you will notice when I'm sure all of you in this tribe are having tremendous synchronistic events right now. Notice them. That's all you have to do. People who become obsessed with synchronicities, that's like a form of addiction. I find a lot of people have an addict kind of personalities becoming so. I saw 11 here and I saw 12 here. You know, I saw 3 11 11s. You saw 3 11 11s, and that's it. Okay, you don't sit there going, what does the 3 11? What you don't have to. This is 3 3 3 3. What does it seem to? These are signs from the gods telling you that you're, as a personal individual, are augmenting and hacking reality. When I say by the gods, whatever the gods are, they can be real or they could be quantum. It's up to you. To me, they're a mixture of both. And they're hacking reality, okay? So you observe, you recognize, and then you continue on your business. And you say, okay, there's a symbol there's a sign from the gods, whatever your god of choice is. Boom, and Photon is a big power energy, and so is Athena at the moment. You move on. You're hacking reality. You're becoming aware of it. Your charisma starts building. Then when your charisma starts building, people are drawn to you. And they're saying, everyone's fucked up over the pandemic. Everyone's fucking, they're all pissed off at a lockdown. And then you're one down at fucking number 23. She looks like a fucking supermodel walking the catwalk. What happened to her? What, you got some money or something? No, she's part of the tribe. She's realized what's going on. She's realized what's going on. And that's what it makes you more attractive to people. Even if you're not a knockout, people will feel attracted to you. Because when you start hacking reality, your charisma starts growing. Because you're no longer being punished by the world around you. You're not a victim of it. You're almost like holding it like a ball of clay and slowly shaping it into what you want. And this gives you tremendous power and a likability to other people and attractiveness to other people. And they're like, wow. And then the smart ones will turn around and say, why is your man Joey down the road? He's not fucked up at all by the whole Rona thing. He doesn't care about nothing, and he's getting on. And he's always in good form, and this kind of thing. What's his secret? And you might sit down one day and says, Joey will turn around and say his neighbour like Larry, and he'll say, listen, Larry, I don't give a fuck about this fucking Rona thing. I'll make my own life. And you go, but you have to find out who's dying. I don't watch the fucking news every night. I don't give a shit. I'm doing things. Look at this garden shed I built out the back. I'll show it to you. Oh, what's that garden shed? What's that sign mean on it? Oh, that's just that's the hammer of Thor. What's Thor? Oh, you mean like in a sci-fi, like the Marvel thing? Yeah, but the real thing. And then Larry is changing. Larry goes back to his missus and go, Jeez, I was just hanging out with your man Joey. Jeez, I felt great being around him. To finally be around somebody who's not like fucking going on about how many died today of this Rona or worried about they'll ever travel again because they can't get the vaccine. Fucking great to be around him. Brilliant. And says, maybe we shouldn't. And then Larry says to his wife, Bridget, he goes, Bridget, maybe we shouldn't watch the fucking TV anymore. And she goes, yeah, you're probably right. And she goes, it's just messing us and the kids up, isn't it? Yeah. I'll tell you what, when the 6 o'clock news on them tomorrow, instead of watching it to see how many people have died of the Rona, what we'll do is we'll have a family day out. We'll go for a walk in the park, or maybe we'll build something in the backyard, like we'll get some wood and build something, like a new backyard patio seating set or something. Yeah, well, let's do that instead. New reality. It's that simple. And then as they're building the wooden thing, the next thing they know is someone hears the banging, and goes, "Oh, you're building a backyard thing? Yeah, but it's a pity no one can come over because of the lockdowns." Well, fuck that. Come on in. Oh, thank God you said that. And then they come over the next night with loads of beer and cheeseburgers and cake for the kids. And suddenly, they've hacked reality. They could have been at home watching the 6 o'clock news and counting the death numbers, but because they came into they saw someone who had a charismatic charge, it had a kind of an echo, or a kind of a, what you call it when boom boom two things bang, move, sort of that kind of an effect, like perpetual motion, and it moved it on. And that's how you. And then suddenly a new reality is forming for these people. And the ones still at home chattering their teeth, watching. Oh Jesus, Mary and Joseph, where's me wall? Where's me rosary beads? 27 died today. I got me fucking. Give me my fucking needle. You know, get me my fucking needlecraft. They don't have the power over you anymore. And that's why we're going to be okay. We're building a raft. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. Abracadabra isn't instantaneously. Abracadabra is the beginning of a process which changes things. And you have this, these people say, like, isn't it amazing how science fiction writers predicted the future? Well, an element of that is they kind of made it happen. As science fiction writers have tremendous power. And this is why we have to sort of be careful to what we believe. And this is why they've H.G. Wells was the center of the Fabian Society. Around the same time. See, there was a book published back in the 1870s, very old one, called Vril, The Coming of the Power Race. And this book was about a race of beings, angelic beings who lived in the earth, who were brought to the surface of the earth with to bring a thing called, they were called the Vrilia, to bring this power called Vril. And this book was so amazing to people at the time that even like Rudolf Steiner thought it was real. There's no way could this book be fake. It was such a well-written science. First, only they call it, these become a scientific romance at the time. This is why H.G. Wells, at the center, a fucking evil fucking anti-Catholic communist at the center of the Fabian Society, started writing science fiction stories like Things to Come and The Time Machine. So he could make, because he knew that if he could write that, he could hack reality and have people believe that we had to do this. We had to abide by their future. And so you had other ones who had no part around the same time, like H.P. Lovecraft. And he wrote stories that have all come true, like The Shadow over Innsmouth is on about what's going on with what the needlecraft will do to people. Now he had one story called The Moon Bog. Now this is how you start the wonderment, the marvel. The Moon Bog takes place about an Irish American who comes back to Ireland, and he, being an American, he has, even though he's Irish, he's thinking like an American now. And there's a bog at the back of his family's ancestral home in Kildare, and he wants to drain the bog and to build housing on it as a development. And the locals say, "Do not drain the bog. Do not drain the bog." And so he drains the bog, and what happens was, they discover ancient Greek and other megaliths and what Lovecraft called Celtic megaliths below the bog, and it unleashes all these kind of ghosts and specters that eventually terrorize him and drive him insane. And it's based heavily on Irish mythology. And Lovecraft wrote the story for, it was a St. Patrick's Day competition in a writing club he was in, to write a mythology or a sci-fi story about Ireland, and so he wrote that, The Moonbog. But he did his research, as he always did, thorough research, as Lovecraft always did, and he spoke about the Parthenons at Tallaght, which is so much I mentioned earlier on in what really happened with the Chaldees. And in Tallaght, at the Parthenons, the belief was that there was a horrific plague and killed them all. And they were Greeks. They were Hellenic Greeks that lived in Ireland, and they were all buried in Tallaght, and which was mispronounced by the Americans as Tallaght, because it's spelled Tallaght, and in Irish. And I lived in Tallaght, and for a while, and it literally means city of the dead. And the place was swirling with all kinds of weird shit when the houses were first built there. And there's a connection there between those two, right? The Chaldees with Tallaght and Lovecraft, who also wrote about. See, you bring all these dots together, reality starts breaking up. Innsmouth, genetic hybridization. The ones who didn't become geneticized weren't taken over by the great god Cthulhu, operating in their minds to see it first. And this is why this is how you hack reality. You start to see interconnected things. Boom, boom. This means that. That means that. This means this. Why is that connected to that? How come this story is so similar? I'll give a good example is H.P. Lovecraft's other story, The Rats in the Walls, about an Englishman who goes back to an who goes back to England to rebuild his own ancestral home, and he starts digging below it and discovers that as he goes down into it, he's going into the ancestral memory of the family. And this is written more or less around the same time that Jung came up with his belief in the collective, his theory of the collective unconscious. Nothing, my friends, in this world is an accident. Nothing. Okay? It's all a result of someone's consciousness somewhere creating a new version of this reality matrix that is brought into manifestation. And to sit there saying, I'm going to protest against the lockdowns, I'm going to go online and keep fighting about needlecraft, I'm going to write to my politicians, you're wasting your fucking time. Get rid of all that. Plant a vegetable garden. Build a new garden shed. Go into your hobbies. Go into your art. At the same time, start thinking about start thinking about what things are like without this thing going on. Okay. Yes, it's important we have scribes of this event. Yes, it's important that we have people being aware of it, but get it from the people who are not part of the mainstream. Okay. So your understanding, this is why they have, in Ireland, they have a visceral affront to the likes of John Waters and Gemma O'Doherty because they're outside the paradigm. Don't switch, look, I will say this time blue in the face, stop sharing BBC, Sky, CNN, RTE, fucking Telegraph, Guardian stuff as if it means something. They don't mean, if you share it to mock it, share it to ridicule it, share it to laugh at it, okay? But not to say, oh, look what the fuckers are doing to us now, okay? Stop that. I still meet so many people who will say, oh, they're all fucking, and I'm like, oh, geez, woken up. Did you watch Newsnight the other night? Oh, for fuck's sake, what are you watching Newsnight for? You know? This is the whole, they're still trapped in this, they're not going to build this new reality if they're still married to the old one, okay? This is the whole thing. So you have to transcend beyond that, okay? And you transcend beyond that by, people with creativity have an edge in all this, naturally, but everyone does. This, and also around, see, the thing is that, like, I'm having friends who have converted, friends who I knew through sort of like the old scene, who've converted to Christianity. I'm not going to turn against them. I'm not going to question they're wrong, but that's their choice, okay? But that's they think that praying to Jesus is going to get them out of the matrix that created Jesus. They're feeding tofu to the piranhas again. If you are Christian, your belief should be that all the Christianity that you've learned to this point has failed you. And what's left is the truth of human kindness and decency. And then you have that kind of elements, that kind of Christ aspect of the Christ consciousness, although I hate that New Age term, that is like a fundamental truth that, like one of the things is about Jesus Christ that puts me off him is that he's portrayed as infallible. He's pure without sin. Well, then that I can't relate to that because I like people who are fucked up. I just like them, and because they're interesting, they create art, and they make life interesting. But there's one passage, I think it's in Matthew, where a pagan woman comes to Christ and says, "My child is dying. Will you help me, Rabbi?" And he says something like, why would I help dogs?" And so, like Jesus, the Prince of Peace, referred to the pagan woman and her child as dogs because they were Gentiles. And Christians go to enormous lengths to it. That never happened. But I'd have more respect for Christians if they said, yeah, of course it happened. Jesus was a man just like the rest of us. I'd have much more respect for them then. But they don't always. You never said that. Well, oh, I don't want to hear about that. Well, you never meet a Christian who knows anything. If a Christian read the Bible, I always say, if you want to make a Christian into a pagan, tell him or her to read the fucking Bible. 10 pages into Leviticus, to be gone, what the fuck is this shit, and shutting it off. That's the problem. They pick it up from their parents, but they don't actually know what's actually in those books. And but I had friends now converting to being Christians, and yeah, I'm a bit disappointed, but I'm still gonna love them. I'm not gonna change anything. But that's their journey, that's their path. But I don't know if they're gonna make it on the raft, and that's what hurts me. That's what hurts me. They're good people. I don't want them left behind. If they're standing at the side of the river feeding tofu to the piranhas and saying, well, if we quote Bible verses while throwing the tofu at the piranhas, then God will save us from them. I'd much rather they come into the woods with us and build a raft. And no one's going to say don't be Christian anymore or anything like that. That's their own business. But this is the thing. This is the choice you're going to have to make. It's a little sad thinking about it now, but it's the choice you're going to have to make. There are people that you love dearly who've been spellbound and marvelled by Lovecraft, and you're just going to have to say, they're gone. I have to go. I have to pack my bags and go. And it's painful. It hurts. But what can you do? This the world has to. The world cannot be. You can't have these bastards running the world the way they're running it right now. And you're never going to lobby them, or no matter how many times you show that video of Bill Gates throwing the pie, getting the pie thrown in his face, that's not going to release you from lockdown. What's going to release you from lockdown is going into the jungle and cutting down the bamboo in the methods that I told you, and build that fucking raft. And that's how you're going to do it, like that. And that's literally rewiring your brains. And you will find that things will start, when enough of us start doing this, it's nothing to do with the 100 monkeys thing, it's nothing to do with that. And when enough of us start doing this, and we will get to we'll start have a raft and we'll be on our way. Quicker than you'll ever know. But the thing is that the important thing is to shut off all contact with the mainstream media, and also with mainstream people who are keeping you at the side of the river, and saying, keep feeding more, because that's what they keep saying, keep feeding them more tofu faster and they'll become vegetarians quicker. No, it's not going to happen. So it's just food for thought there, and it's not tofu. And I hope you got something from this. I want you, and I hope you will, start to see your own life as a monomyth, and start to see it in that there was nothing, even the bad times, had great meaning towards this epic journey that you're living on. And I've absolutely no doubt, this is not a revolution. We're not coming back around to where we started again. Nothing like that. Get away from people who wear Che Guevara t-shirts. This is about walking away. Just walking away and starting a new world. One imaginative process at a time. One synchronicity at a time. One moment of eureka at a time. One creative project at a time. They only have, it's everything they've told you about quantum theory is true. The universe that you're not looking at doesn't exist. So don't look at it. Love yous all. Bye.